Islamic State, also called ISIL or Daesh, has suffered a string of defeats in Syria and Iraq in the last few months. And over the weekend, ISIL fighters were forced out of the ancient city of Palmyra by Syrian government forces. How much of a threat does the group still pose? In a few minutes, I will talk with a panel of experts who study jihadist movements. But we begin with CCTV correspondent Natalie Carney, who filed this report from Istanbul, Turkey.
It wasn't that long ago that ISIL appeared invincible. Not anymore. The Iraqi army is preparing an offensive to retake the country's second-largest city, Mosul, which has been under ISIL control for almost 2 years. Iraqi forces took back control of another ISIL stronghold, Ramadi, in December. With Russian support, Syrian troops recaptured the city of Palmyra, opening a strategic corridor for an assault into the heart of the so-called Islamic State, including its self-proclaimed capital, Raqqa. The Pentagon says ISIL has lost around 40% of its territory in Iraq and Syria since 2014. But as it loses momentum in the Middle East, ISIL terrorists have lashed out at unarmed civilians in Europe.
They are desperate. That's why they are pursuing two strategies right now. First of them is what we see in Brussels and before in Paris, to show the foreign militants in their territory that they are controlling, that it's a great force to be part of. And the other strategy they are pursuing right now is trying to gain ground in other countries.
Countries like Libya. ISIL has been taking advantage of the chaos there since the fall of Muammar Gaddafi. And in neighboring Tunisia, a gunman massacred 38 tourists on a beach last June. Tunisia's struggling economy has made it a prime recruiting ground.
There is still very high unemployment in the Tunisian youth. So that's why it's also a source of new foreign fighters, because young people are very desperate. They don't see any future for them, and they can be vulnerable for the ISIS propaganda.
By government estimates, around 3,000 Tunisians are fighting with ISIL in Iraq and Syria. Many have also joined ISIL in Libya. And according to the United Nations, ISIL militants are operating in 25 of Afghanistan's 34 provinces.
Turkey, too, is under considerable threat. In the last 8 months alone, nearly 150 people have been killed in ISIL attacks in some of the most popular and populated places in major cities across the country. And ISIL have threatened to kill more.
Few would know the threat ISIL poses better than Bunyamin Aygun. The Turkish photojournalist was kidnapped and tortured by the extremists in northern Syria for more than a month.
ISIL may be the most well-organized group in the world. It isn't very important for them to have land. The ideology is more important. If they sacrifice their territories, they will just go underground. Then they will suddenly appear when we are not waiting. It could be in other countries, such as in Belgium and before in France, in Ankara and Istanbul. They will appear in unpredicted places.
Yet ISIL will still need money to run such operations, but its money appears to be running out. U.S. coalition and Russian airstrikes have targeted the group's oil assets, cutting off a key source of income. The refugee exodus has hurt too. Fewer people means less tax to collect. The group has been forced to cut costs. Leaked ISIL documents show the militants have slashed fighter salaries by up to 50%. Military operations at the Turkish border have also choked off supplies and potential recruits to ISIL's so-called caliphate. Despite these obvious setbacks, support for ISIL and their strategies continue.
ISIL will put on their agenda other big countries, like America and England, countries they haven't been able to hit so far, so they can show themselves and remind everyone that we are still here. Europe, America and Turkey will always be on their target.
Natalie Carney, CCTV, Istanbul, Turkey.